There's a phrase that keeps coming up in every serious financial conversation happening right now. New World Order. Not from a conspiracy channel, not from a retail crypto influencer, from Ashish Birla, the CEO of Evernorth, one of the largest publicly traded digital asset treasury companies built specifically around XRP, sitting across from one of the most respected institutional crypto research desks in the market. His exact words, "You cannot go 2 minutes without talking about blockchain and tokenization. That is the New World Order." And then he said something that I think most XRP holders have not fully processed yet. He said the connective tissue that Ripple laid, years of hard work connecting into real financial institutions, getting licensed, building the plumbing, that is what makes XRP stand out. Not the technology alone, the connections. Today, I am going to break down exactly what that means, why it matters for the price, and what one specific part of this interview, a part almost nobody is covering right now, could be more important than everything else Ripple is doing combined. Welcome to XRP Verified. If you want the real picture without the hype, subscribe now and turn on the bell. Let's get into it. Let me start with the framework Birla laid out, because this is the most honest, most grounded description of what XRP actually needs to succeed that I have heard from anyone inside the ecosystem. He said XRP needs 3 things working together simultaneously: the technology, the connective tissue, and the regulation. And here is what stopped me when I heard it. He said technology is approximately 25% of what matters. 25%. The thing most crypto people obsess over, the blockchain, the speed, the 3-second settlement, the near zero fees, is 1/4 of the equation. Connective tissue, meaning the actual licensed relationships with real financial institutions, the integrations, the regulatory approvals in each jurisdiction, the years of relationship building that Ripple has done. That is approximately 50% of what determines success. And regulation, the legal framework that allows banks and institutions to actually deploy capital into XRP at scale, is the remaining 25%, plus what he called the marketing and ecosystem development on top. Think about what that actually means. If you have been frustrated that XRP has the best technology and the price has not reflected it, Birla just told you exactly why. The technology was never going to be enough on its own. The connective tissue took years to build, and the regulation has not arrived yet in the United States. But here is the other side of that framework. The technology is confirmed. Ripple has spent over a decade building the connective tissue, and Birla's own company, Evernorth, exists specifically because that connective tissue is now real enough to build a publicly traded treasury product on top of it. And the Clarity Act is targeting a Senate floor vote in mid-July. 2 of the 3 pillars are in place. The third is weeks away from potentially arriving. Now let me talk about the numbers that Birla and other analysts discussed, because the scale of what is connected to Ripple right now deserves to be stated clearly. Ripple Treasury, formerly G Treasury, currently processes approximately $13 trillion in annual volume for some of the world's largest corporations. The list of banks connected to that network reads like a roster of the institutions that handle 80% of the world's corporate money: Bank of America, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, HSBC, Citibank, Wells Fargo, Deutsche Bank, BNP Paribas, Barclays, ICBC, DBS. Every single one of those institutions is already connected to Ripple's infrastructure. Brad Garlinghouse has projected that approximately 30% of that $13 trillion in annual volume will move through XRP and RLUSD over the next 5 years. That is roughly $3.9 trillion flowing through XRP rails annually at that point. Now, is that enough? Birla himself suggested he expected that number to be higher, and analysts covering the XRP ecosystem have pointed out that 10 times growth in real-world assets on the XRP ledger, from 5 billion today to 50 billion in 5 years, would actually be a disappointment given the infrastructure in place and the scale of institutional interest. The expectation from inside the ecosystem is $500 billion or more. Luke Judges of Ripple said on camera that 100 times from 5 billion to 500 billion is, in his words, easy. Now, I want to be honest here. These are projections from people who have an obvious interest in XRP succeeding. The actual numbers will depend on how fast regulation arrives, how quickly institutions deploy, and how much of the institutional settlement market XRP captures versus other chains. But the baseline infrastructure to support numbers of this scale, the banking connections, the licensed entities, the DTCC working group membership, the JP Morgan pilot settlement, all of that is confirmed and real. Now let me talk about something that Birla touched on and that one on-chain analyst laid out in detail this week, because I think this is genuinely underappreciated by most XRP holders right now. The XRP Ledger DEX, the native decentralized exchange built directly into the XRP ledger, may become one of the most critical pieces of infrastructure for the AI payment economy. Here is why. AI agents do not have preferences about which currency they use. They care about completing the transaction efficiently. If one party wants to receive RLUSD, and another wants XRP, and a third wants a different stablecoin entirely, the AI agent needs a way to route between those assets instantly, autonomously, and without friction. The XRP Ledger DEX does exactly that. It is a native, built-in exchange that can route any asset to any other asset on the XRP ledger automatically. The AI agent creates the transaction, the DEX finds the optimal path, the settlement happens in 3 to 5 seconds, and the receiver gets exactly what they want. No negotiation, no friction, no intermediaries. The full AI payment stack on the XRP ledger looks like this. RLUSD provides stable dollar-denominated value. XRP provides bridge liquidity between currencies. The XRP ledger provides fast settlement. The native DEX provides autonomous routing between any assets. And here is the scale of the market this addresses. Stablecoin volume is already exceeding $100 trillion annually. AI agent payment markets are projected to reach $180 to $200 trillion in volume within a few years as autonomous AI systems handle more and more financial operations. The networks that facilitate that volume, cheaply, instantly, autonomously, are going to capture extraordinary value. Ripple has already launched its AI developer toolkit for the XRP ledger. MasterCard has already selected Ripple as one of its core partners for its AI agent payment system. The infrastructure is being built right now. Most retail investors are focused on the DTCC story and the regulatory story, which are both real and important, and missing the AI story entirely. Now let me give you the current real-world asset data, because I check this regularly, and today's numbers tell an interesting story. Total real-world assets on the XRP ledger are sitting at approximately $4 billion, slightly down from recent highs, reflecting broader market conditions. RLUSD has grown to approximately $759 million, which represents extraordinary growth given that it did not exist 18 months ago and has surged approximately 97% in the last 30 days alone. Ethereum continues to lose real-world asset market share, down approximately 5.6% in recent tracking. The XRP ledger has been gaining ground relative to Ethereum on this metric consistently. One development worth watching: Ondo Finance, which had been a significant contributor to XRP ledger real-world asset totals, appears to be moving some assets to Stellar. This is worth noting, honestly. It does not represent a collapse. The XRP ledger total remains strong and growing. But it is a reminder that multiple chains are competing for institutional real-world asset deployments, and XRP is not the only option institutions are considering. The XRP ledger's advantage in this competition is the Ripple relationship network, the connective tissue Birla described. Most other chains are competing purely on technology. XRP competes with years of institutional relationships, regulatory licenses across dozens of jurisdictions, and a suite of products built specifically for institutional use. Now let me give you the honest picture, because there are real questions here that deserve straight answers. Birla was asked directly what institutions are actually going to do with their XRP on Evernorth right now. And to his credit, he was honest. He said the ecosystem still needs to develop more. The on-chain DeFi protocols for institutional use are still being built. The liquidity is not yet where it needs to be for the largest institutions to deploy at maximum scale. That is a real limitation. The infrastructure story is compelling, but compelling infrastructure that is not yet fully liquid and not yet fully regulatory cleared does not immediately translate to price movement. The Clarity Act passing is the regulatory unlock. The on-chain product development that Evernorth and others are working on is the ecosystem unlock. Both are needed for the full potential to be realized. BlackRock and Morgan Stanley have not yet entered XRP in a meaningful way. Birla noted this clearly. They are watching volume. When XRP trading volume increases to the point where their client demand justifies entry, which he believes will happen as more retail and institutional investors recognize the asset, they will come in aggressively. But that entry has not happened yet. This is not a reason for panic. It is a reason for patience and honest expectations. The destination is documented. The infrastructure is being built. The regulation is approaching. The price at $1 does not reflect any of that. But timing, as always, is uncertain. Here is what this all means for you as an XRP holder. Ashish Birla, a CEO who has built a publicly traded company specifically around XRP, confirmed that the connective tissue Ripple has spent years building into real financial institutions is exactly what makes XRP stand out in the institutional tokenization race. The banks connected to Ripple Treasury handle 80% of the world's corporate money. Those connections are real. The regulation to fully activate them is coming. The AI payment stack built on the XRP LDEX is potentially bigger than most of the other XRP stories being covered right now, and almost nobody is talking about it. RLUSD plus XRP plus the XRP Ledger plus the native DEX equals the complete autonomous AI payment infrastructure. And the markets that uses are measured in hundreds of trillions of dollars. Real-world assets on the XRP Ledger are growing. RLUSD is at 759 million and growing fast. Ethereum is losing market share. The competitive position of the XRP Ledger among institutional chains is improving, even as Ondo's movement to Stellar is a reminder that XRP does not have the institutional real-world asset market to itself. BlackRock and Morgan Stanley are not in yet, but the CEO closest to this ecosystem says when volume ticks up and client demand arrives, they will come in aggressively. That moment has not happened yet. The patient, positioned investor is waiting for it. Your 3 takeaways for today. Technology is 25%. Connective tissue, the licensed institutional relationships Ripple has spent years building, is 50%. Regulation is the final unlock. 2 of 3 pillars are confirmed. The third is weeks away. The XRP DEX AI payment stack is the underappreciated story. RLUSD plus XRP plus native DEX plus fast settlement equals the infrastructure for a $180 to $200 trillion AI payment market. Get familiar with this narrative because it is going to matter more over the next 12 months than most people realize today. The ecosystem is real, but still developing. Full liquidity, full institutional DeFi product availability, and full regulatory clarity have not all arrived simultaneously yet. That gap between current state and full potential is where the price opportunity sits. Stay informed, stay patient, and as always, stay verified.